Hello. This is my short video on Mizuro's 10 phases of transformative learning. Um, in the description, it talks about not being perfect, so I'm going to do the best I can to kind of tell you a story that impacted my life that I think follows this protocol of how you use these 10 phases to start with a certain particular belief system and then transform to a different mindset or belief based on things that have happened. So, disorienting dilemma. Um, in my particular story, um, it's about golf. At one point in my life, I was trying to be a professional golfer. And um, if you've ever been involved in that life, it's a very difficult one where you have um, a lot of different opinions about what should be done to become better at the game. It's a very complicated, very technical game. And when I first started playing, there wasn't a lot of information available like there is today. We didn't have phones, and we didn't have access to information through, YouTube or social media or anything like that. So you just kind of had to figure it out on your own. But at the beginning of my journey, which was probably right around my mid 30s, mid to early 30s, was just the time when this information was becoming available, but it wasn't as easily available as it is today. So I had got a hold of a couple people that I thought, out of the research that I've done, that I thought, could help me with getting better. So I went to this one instructor. I won't say any names on here because they're all world famous. So I don't want to get into that. But I went to a particular instructor who had an opinion of what should be done to get better and where the forces and the torques and the swing come from. Um, I bought into that scenario because, as any student would, you have to buy in to your coach's philosophies in order to make a relationship that is going to be meaningful. So, as I started to, engage in the teachings, what he was teaching me to do, I was noticing as I was trying to implement those things into my golf swing, I wasn't seeing the changes that I wanted to see. The improvements weren't there. But I believed in what he was saying. It made sense to me based on the information that was available, and you know what what he was saying, and some of the students he had worked with in the past. Uh, so I assumed that those things were going to to come into my game. So you know the the turning point in my scenario was when I got injured. So, you know, I was trying to do the things he was telling me to do, and it actually put some stress onto my left arm, and I ended up getting injured in a softball game to the point where I had to have surgery to correct it. And so, you know, with that, I would say number two, which is self examination, the emotional response. Had a lot of it was a more of a there was a lot of impact and emotionally because I am someone who is popular in my community, and so I am a really good player, and people ask me questions about their games, and so I was explaining to them, and I was very strong belief system in what they were teaching me, and I was passing that information along to others, and they were trusting me to give them that information. So when I hurt my arm, I'd already had a little bit of self doubt, but I wanted to believe in it because in order to get the results, you have to pretty much believe. So when I hurt my arm and I wasn't seeing the results, and then I had to come through the recovery, I had a lot of time for self examination, which is number two. And I did feel guilt, and I did feel fear, and I did feel anger in the um, um, you know, all the things that had happened, the 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 negative energy coming from the source that was giving me the information versus the other side. Like in golf, it's such a wild thing because there's so many different opposing. One of the business models for that as a teaching instructor is to badmouth, it seems, all the other instructors. Like one way is the right way and all other ways are the wrong way. And so like I bought into that. And it caused me some problems emotionally, and it caused me some problems, just with my relationships. But anyways, so then you get into the critical assessment of assumptions where you question the beliefs, the values, the assumptions that shape your thinking. Why do I believe this? Well, I believed it because I thought I had to. I believed it because he had other players who were good that I emulated and I wanted to be like. And so I bought into that salesmanship that I got. But in the reality, I had to dive deeper. I had to find out for myself what was the right way, what was the wrong way. And so, all of those things, led me down that path. And then the recognition that others have gone through. This is another thing about it is that there's so many different teaching like professionals out there, and there's so many different students, and they all have an opinion. And so like you start to see them, on the course, you see them at tournaments, you start to talk to them, interact with them, and they're all saying the same thing. They're all trying to do something they're being told by somebody else. And it's so difficult. The whole business model of teaching like golf is such a difficult thing. And so with that being said, I see what they have been through. I've seen the struggles. We all are out there trying to make a living playing golf, and it is very competitive and very difficult. And it's such a difficult sport. I mean, there's so many things about it that are hard. And, so getting the right information is crucial to getting to the top level. And so number 5 would be exploration of new roles, relationships, and actions. So what I had to do is I had to start thinking differently. I had to start looking inside myself for these answers instead of outside myself. So what I did is I decided to try to get the information from each top pro, that was in this little consensus of people bad mouthing each other, and literally break down everything they were saying and build it back and do that for each one and see which way I thought would be the best way to learn. And then take the things that I already knew about athletics and playing at a high level and try to integrate that into my own philosophy. So number 5, exploration of new roles, relationships, and actions. I decided to put myself in a different environment with different people. So that was an action for sure. And I built new relationships with other people, and started to try to listen and hear more of a widespread variety of things and then make some decisions. And then, I've always taught golf to the locals around here, and started, being less certain about what, or direct, I guess, about what I was teaching them and make it more about their athletic movements. There's some fundamentals of the golf swing that are the same throughout all teaching. But when it gets down to what initiates, the force and the torques and the swing is when it gets real complicated. So, just being a little more cautious about what I say and making it more generalized so it wasn't so this is the way, that was a change that I made. And then planning the course of action, number 6. I kind of been talking about this the whole time. As you start to see, breakdowns in the philosophy, or you start to question things because you're not seeing the results, you're always coming up with a new plan of attack, or at least I am. So again, I had a plan. I changed my behavior. I changed my way of thinking. I spoke about that earlier. I started breaking down more information and trying to deduce it myself instead of relying on others to just lead me blindly. So that kind of gets into some other things we're talking about in our classes about, deeper level thinking instead of just memorizing what they told me or taking it as faith, trying to break it down to the root of it all so that I have a deeper understanding so that I can use that information to become more competent in my movements. Acquiring knowledge and skill to implement the plan. The whole time that I was going through this issue, I was acquiring touch and feel and awareness and coordination and central nervous system training. I was acquiring all these things, so I was gaining skill the entire time. What the trick of it is, especially with such a technical sport, is organizing those things. I'm still using the same muscles and the same patterns as I was before, but I have to organize those into something that my mind can tell me to do in a swing that takes less than a second to complete. And so that's the hardest part. And rhythm is one of the main things that cause you to play better golf. But to get your skill level to a point where you can compete with the best players on the planet, you have to be able to organize all of your thoughts and then be able to execute. So all of that, acquiring knowledge and skill to implement the plan. Number seven, the plan was to be the best golfer that I could be, and I was organizing all of those things that I told you that that I was bringing together into my skill sets, into a game that would compete, against other great players. Number eight, trying out new roles or behaviors. Like I said, I think all of this kind of ties together. Everything that I was doing when I left blindly walking the path of taking this guy's information as faith and starting to create my own, thought processes. That is the new behavior. That is the initial or the birth of the new behavior. From there, I got, practice sessions changed a little bit, not much, a little more focused on certain things than others. Understanding how the ball flies and understanding how to read it and understanding how to translate it out onto the golf course. Everything kind of modified slightly. The behaviors didn't just completely overhaul. I mean, you're playing a game. But the way I went about doing it, the behaviors and that changed. I wouldn't say my role changed because I've been a player the whole time. But the way that I handled the role that I had changed a little bit. The way my message came across to the people who were asking me questions about what I was doing. And then the game I was playing, the ball flight changes, the ability changes, my weapons or, the skills that I have in the background changed. So I would say how that would pertain. Building confidence and competence in my new role. Well, as I started to see my scores drop, that's always the ultimate confidence builder. When you start to have better tournament scores or finishes, and I set the course record at my home course. I was club champion 2 years in a row. When I did those type of things, you start to build confidence, and it also validates. Look, those things that validate the work, the new mindset, the new way of thinking, organizing, all the battles that you overcome. I mean, all those things kind of tie into your confidence and how you, build yourself up each day, grain of sand a day, to reach new heights. I mean, that's just been something I've done my entire life, no matter what it was: basketball, golf, tennis, teaching, student, professional, construction worker, whatever it is. I try to do good. It's just me. Reintegration into life with a new perspective. So, that one's interesting because, you know, uh, this class is about teaching adults, or this pathway, I guess would be a way to say it, is about teaching adults. And so, I touched about that. Teaching golf is an interesting thing because you could be telling them all the right things, but they just don't have the ability to do it, and then they don't have the work ethic or the due diligence to go through it a grain of sand at a time. So it's a very tricky profession, being a golf teaching pro. But I would say, I've always been kind of a natural born leader. A lot of the things that I'm learning in these classes has really validated some of the things that I do naturally, which is great for my confidence. But I've been a natural born leader my whole life. And so, like, I've never really shied away. I know that I'm humble enough to know that no one's right about everything. I know that I've always been someone who is thirsty for knowledge, so I'm always learning. The part about this particular scenario was when when I moved into this game and I got into the learning and meeting and traveling the United States to meet these teaching pros. They're so dead set that their way is right and everybody else's way is wrong. It's very toxic. And so it's like if you're in his camp, you have to be in his camp or he'll drop you as a student. And they're all like that. If you go to another teacher, they'll drop you in a second, and then the relationship is burnt, and then the negativity that comes from that breaking up of a relationship you have to deal with. I've never really been that way. I've never felt there's one right way for anything, and I've always been in the search and the quest for knowledge. So I haven't really had to like reintegrate myself into life, so to speak, or my new perspective didn't change who I was as a person from the root of who I am. It might have changed the information that I have. And then the way I communicate or articulate that to a student or to someone who I had said something to about this in a very, if I said them in a very confident manner, this is the way to do it. And then I change my mind later. I have to go back and I have to go, I have to talk to that person. And I'm like, look, I have a new understanding now that I have now changed to this perspective. That's very difficult to do, especially when you're someone like me who's very confident in what they do. But as I've gotten older and as I've learned, there's been a lot of things that have happened in my life where I thought I knew what I was doing and I knew just enough to get myself in trouble because I didn't know enough to know what to expect next. And so I've tried to learn from that perspective, to back away from being so dead set in my belief system, be confident internally, and let my results and my actions validate what I think and let it speak for itself. Then I am out running around trying to save the world and tell everybody everything that they can do. I've been more about myself and speaking about myself and my results. And if I need to make a change, I'll make them and I'll describe those things in my teachings, and people can take those teachings and apply them however they want. So Manita, again, this went 17 minutes. It said 4 to 6. I don't personally think I can get through all 10 of these in the way that you want for 13 to 15 points. I wanted to tell you a fun story. This one is very fun. If I wish I could actually keep going and articulate it even better, because if you really seen what I've been through with this scenario, this is a really interesting story about the intricacies of adult learning. Maybe one day we'll get a Zoom call or something and talk about that, because I think it would be something that would be, you could teach me a lot from my perspective, and I think you would enjoy the story. But I've been really busy lately, and I've been a little scattered, but I wanted to thank you for your patience, and I hope this video is acceptable. If it's too long, if you'll just let me know, I can try to condense it down. But the only way I thought I could get to what you were asking for, compelling, personal, deeply reflective, clearly articulating all 10 points, this is the best I could do. So anyways, thanks again for your time. I hope you enjoyed my story.